Good morning. Good morning. And it's good to see you all here today. I don't know what the weather is like where you are, but it is a beautiful day here in St. Louis. Well, so as you know, we've been talking about the Lotus Sutra, and we're getting very close to the end. And there's a chapter at the end that I was tempted to skip. I have been tempted to skip several of the chapters in the Lotus Sutra, but I find that the more I read them, uh, the more I can't resist them. And the more I find they have to offer. So we will talk about this chapter 27, which is entitled in the Jean Reeves translation of the Lotus Sutra, The Previous Life of King Wonderfully Adorned. The Previous Life of King Wonderfully Adorned. And as is often the case in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha is telling a story about the past life of someone. And the story starts off, as many of the stories do in the Lotus Sutra, in a distant land long, long ago, many eons, countless eons ago. And in this land, there was a Buddha. And the Buddha's name is very long. The Buddha was named Wisdom, blessed by the King of Constellations, called the sound of thunder in the clouds, Tathagata. So that was the Buddha's name presiding over this land. And in the land, there was also a king called Wonderfully Adorned. And the king had a wife named Pure Virtue and two sons named Pure Treasury and Pure Eyes. So those are the main characters in this story. And as it turned out, the king was sort of a typical king for the time, but his sons were unusual. They had practiced the Bodhisattva way diligently and had divine powers, as it's called. And the Buddha, who was presiding over this land, the Buddha, wisdom blessed by the King of Constellations, called the sound of thunder in the clouds, Tathagata, was wanting to guide the king. So he started to teach the Dharma Flower Sutra, the Lotus Sutra. And I'll just read a section here. Meanwhile, the two sons, Pure Treasury and Pure Eyes, went to their mother and, putting their 10 fingers and palms together, said to her, "We beg you, mother, to go and visit wisdom blessed by the King of Constellations, called the sound of thunder in the clouds, Buddha. We also want to wait on, associated with, make offerings to, and worship him. Why? Because this Buddha is teaching the Dharma Flower Sutra among the multitude of human and heavenly beings, and we ought to hear and receive it." Well, the mother replied to her sons, "Your father has a faith in a non-Buddhist way, deeply attached to Brahman teachings. You should go and talk to your father so that he may participate and go with you." Pure Treasury and Pure Eyes, putting their 10 fingers and palms together, said to their mother, "We are sons of the Dharma King, yet we were born in this home of wrong views." The mother said to her sons, you should be concerned about your father and show him some divine marvels, so that when he sees them, his mind will become clear and he will permit us to go to the Buddha. So the mother is talking about the father being attached to Brahman teachings, Brahmanism, which was a pre-Hindu faith. It was probably a number of things going on in various scattered locations, so it wasn't just a unified thing, but it was characterized by a rigid caste system, a hierarchy, in which there were very few Brahmin, the priestly class, the educated class, those who could read Sanskrit and recite the Vedas. There were very few of them, but there were many people who were in lower classes, some in very low classes, like the Dalits, what used to be called the untouchables, who were treated very poorly in society and were locked into their caste. So a very hierarchical, patriarchal system. And the mother was encouraging her sons to, in a sense, open their father's mind to other possibilities. So what the sons did in order to attract attention from their father was to perform a feat in which they leaped into the sky the height of 7 pala trees and stayed there suspended doing various tricks. Now, I didn't know what a pala tree was, so I had to look that up. And as it turns out, some of you may know this, but a tala tree is a kind of palm tree that is common in Central Asia or in Southern Asia. And it has an average height of about 60 feet, but it can be much taller, even as tall as 100 feet. So when you leap the height of 7 tala trees, you're leaping more than 400 feet into the air and remaining there suspended. So that's going to attract anyone's attention. And this theme of being suspended in the air, if you remember back to the stupa that was suspended in the air in earlier chapters of the Lotus Sutra, this theme of being suspended in the air above suggests a place where you can gain a wider perspective, where you can see things with a wider angle of vision, that you can put things into a greater context. And astronauts who have had the rare opportunity of seeing the Earth from space have described what a profound experience this is and how it changes their perspective of the whole human drama. So in any case, the sons were successful in attracting the attention of their father with these tricks. And the father then wanted to go and see their teacher, the Buddha of that time, with the long name. The mother, of course, wanted to come along, and she brought her retinue. So I'll read further. With this, the 2 sons said to their parents, "Good father and mother, we beg you in time to go to the wisdom blessed by the King of Constellations called the Sound of Thunder in the Clouds, Buddha, approach him and make offerings to him. Why? Because a Buddha is as difficult to meet as an Udambara flower or as a one-eyed tortoise meeting the hole in a floating log. But we, being richly blessed from the past, have been born at a time when we could encounter the Buddha-dharma. Therefore, father and mother, you should listen to us and allow us to leave home. Why? Because Buddhas are difficult to meet, and it is difficult to find the right time as well. At that time, all the 84,000 women in the rear palace of King Wonderfully Adorned became capable of receiving and embracing the Dharma Flower Sutra. Pure Eyes Bodhisattva had long ago mastered the Dharma flower concentration, and Pure Treasury Bodhisattva had mastered the concentration of freedom from evil levels of existence, innumerable hundreds of thousands of billions of eons ago. This was because he wanted to lead all the living away from the evil levels of existence. The wife of that king had attained the Buddha's assembly concentration and knew the secret resources of Buddhas. Her two sons, using their powers of skillful means, skillfully transformed their father, enabling him to have faith in, to understand, and to love and delight in the Buddha-dharma. So they all went to see the Buddha, and it's indicated here in this passage that there's a history for the sons and the mother, that they both in prior lives had innumerable encounters with Buddhas and had been practicing for many, many eons. Well, the king, upon hearing and seeing the Buddha, was joyous with delight. And after this encounter, the king immediately, it says in the next section, the king immediately turned over his land to his younger brother, and together with his queen and two sons and all their followings, gave up his home and practiced the way under the Dharma of the Buddha. Having left his home for 84,000 years, the king was always dutiful and diligent in practicing the wonderful Dharma Flower Sutra. And after these years had passed, he attained the concentration of being adorned with all the pure blessings. Then he rose into the air to the height of 7 tala trees and said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, these two sons of mine have already done the work of the Buddha by their divine transformations, changing my wrong views, enabling me to dwell at peace in the Buddha-dharma, and allowing me to see the world-honored one. These two sons are my good friends. They wanted to awaken the roots of goodness from my previous lives, bringing abundant benefits to me. This is why they were born into the family." And the Buddha responded a little later on, "Great king, you should understand that a good friend is the great cause and condition by which one is transformed. A good friend is the great cause and condition by which one is transformed, led to see the Buddha, and aroused to seek supreme awakening." The king spoke to the Buddha once again towards the end of the chapter, saying, "World-honored one, this is unprecedented. The Dharma of the Tathagata is completely full of inconceivable and wonderful blessings. The practice of his teachings and precepts will bring peace and comfort and good feelings. From this day forward, I will no longer follow my own whims, nor will I allow myself wrong views, pride or arrogance, anger, or any other evil states." So I suspect this chapter was to provide a contrast with a common religious tradition of the day, Brahmanism, which was highly hierarchical, by, in a sense, flipping the whole hierarchy on its head, where the king, who was a Brahmin, and in a position of great power, becomes the student of the younger sons and of his wife. Because, as with many of the chapters in the Lotus Sutra, there is a strong egalitarian streak that everyone is destined to become a Buddha. And this includes, at least according to the Lotus Sutra, not only all humans, but many non-humans as well. Thinking back on the dragon daughter, the dragon princess. So, what do we make of this? Well, there was an occurrence during this past week that I would like to share that I draw a parallel. I don't know if you will or not, but a friend of ours was gifted a vehicle, a car, after having not owned a vehicle for many years, several years. And there's a process to this in the state of Missouri, and it's a little complicated, but the transferring the title is one thing, but then you have to register the vehicle in the name of the new owner. And this requires paperwork. One of the things required is a property tax receipt or waiver. And unfortunately, after this friend had witnessed the death of his truck several years ago, he neglected to inform the Department of Revenue that he no longer owned the truck. So they were systematically adding more tax and penalties each year subsequently, until the total tax bill approached $500. Well, talking to the person at the DMV, he was told that he would need to go down to the Department of Revenue, 41 South Central, downtown Clayton, and straighten it out there. So he did, but I don't know how many of you have been at 41 South Central in downtown Clayton, but it's the main governmental office building, and it is a scene of sort of ongoing chaos. You go through a metal detector, and then you enter into this large area where there's a lot of people having conversations, and many of them looking confused, trying to find out where they're supposed to go. And they have a series of desks with workers behind plexiglass sheets who are supposed to attend to your needs, except you have to get sort of an appointment in order to get there, and it's a long process. Anyway, he goes to accomplish this task at 41 South Central, and this friend is somewhat hard of hearing. So talking through these plexiglass plates is a problem. There's a little vent where you're supposed to be able to talk through the plates, but the sound is diminished from the person's voice and somewhat garbled. And also there is all the ambient noise going on all around you because people next to you are also talking to people through plexiglass plates. So it's really hard to understand what's going on. So he ended up getting scuttled from one person to another, and at least one of the people was rather insulting, saying something like, "Why can't you understand me?" But finally, the fourth person he was sent to was, by his description, a young black girl. He said, "I was sent to a young black girl." And as it turned out, she said to him, "You know, my father is also hearing impaired." So she exercised great patience in going over this with him. And as he said, sat down with him and went through it and finally arrived at the conclusion that, yes, he would owe some tax, but it would be more like $150, not $500, which he paid and was successful in getting the car, with the paperwork needed to get the car registered. So it seems like that, as he called her, young black girl, performed a kind of miracle. She she arose to the height of 7 tala trees and looked down on the situation and in a greater context, a context that included love for her father, who also had impaired hearing. And compassion flowed so that she would have the patience to work with the person in front of her, and resolve this knotty problem of adjusting the tax records to reflect the reality that the truck was not in his possession for several years. So I think these miracles don't just occur long, long ago in a land far away. They are happening all around us if we just notice them. Notice that flow of compassion. That where does it come from? We don't really know, but it seems to be available at our disposal if we can elevate ourselves high enough to see a greater context. So I think I'll stop there. I don't want to use up too much of discussion time, and I guess I'll leave you with not so much a question, but I wonder if anything about the story sparks some memories in your mind or sparks any questions in your mind. If anything about this story resonates. So we'll stop there and break up into smaller groups. Thank you very much for listening today.